When I fall in love, I get dizzy. I fall out there just to...
This is Historical Hotties, a podcast where we go through different categories of historical figure and try and figure out which one is the biggest babe.
Still,
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is that time once again. Welcome to Historical Hotties, the podcast where we pit person against person in a battle for historical hotness supremacy. I am Whitney Nelson, and this is co-hostess with the mostest,
Lindsay Nelson.
This week's category is fortune teller, people otherwise known as oracles or prognosticators. Lindsay, what would you like to talk about your soothsayer first?
Thank you very much, Whitney. I would like to put a blanket disclaimer on everything I'm going to say here is that I am terrible at pronouncing things, and no offense is meant to anyone by my pronunciation. I'm trying really hard. As Whitney can attest, I sometimes have problems pronouncing English. So foreign languages, definitely not my thing.
Noted.
My fortune teller is Li Chunfeng of the Sui dynasty in China. He was born in 602 and was a very noted Chinese mathematician, astronomer, and historian. But what makes him fall under the auspices of this category is that using numerology, he wrote a book of 60 prophecies for the future of China. And these prophecies were conveyed in surreal drawings and poems. So he started life as a mathematician. He was appointed to the Imperial Astronomy Bureau to help institute calendar reform because at the time, the celestial calendar that they were operating on, even though it was only a couple of years old, was already getting off between like lunar and solar years and causing wrong dates like that. And it was a incredibly respected and trusted position for him to get because of the Chinese belief in the mandate of heaven, that if one altered the calendar, that person would have some control over the connections between the heavens and the emperor. So you could tell that as the imperial astronomer, who was very, very trusted to allowed to tamper with sort of the fabric of the universe in this way. His prophecy collection that he arrived at using numerology is called the Tui B2, or a rough English translation, the message chart prophecies. There are 60 prophecies, and each one is composed of a surrealist sketch and a brief poem. His track record is supposedly excellent, as many people claim that as much as 55 of these prophecies have already been fulfilled. They're supposed to take place in order, so the first poem / picture in the book is the first thing to happen, and the second one the second thing to happen, and so on. Of course, lots of people have used these at different times, interpreted in different ways to support their positions. Different rebellions and stuff have claimed that their rebellion is one of the prophecies.
Of course.
But recently, the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party took over China. They banned it as superstition and one of the four olds, 4 texts revolving around superstition that were integral to ancient China. So that is my fortune teller, and I think if it is true that 55 of his prophecies have been fulfilled, then I think he ranks pretty high on the prognosticator success rate.
Yeah, totally. All right, so my prognosticator is, and again, pronunciation, this is a little bit easier for me than Chinese, but Ulrica Arfvidsson is the name of my fortune teller. She was a professional Swedish fortune teller during the reign of Gustav III of Sweden. She was the daughter of a caretaker of the palace, and then after her father died, her mother remarried to a chef of the royal household. So she spent her whole life sort of in the royal household in Sweden, and she grew up in an in-between world where she heard a lot of the rumors and gossip of high society. She was familiar with all of the stuff going on in the court, basically part of the staff that was living there, so she was familiar with everyone who was running the place and a much lower class of people. And a lot of the lower class of people is how she got some of her rumors and gossip from the higher circles of society, but it also made her very comfortable in kind of any sort of circumstance. She's been described as super smart, like sharp as a tack, incredibly talented, well-developed intuition, and in addition to her fortune telling, which I will get into, she was also just kind of always known as someone who knew everything about everybody. She was very up to date, not just with gossip, but also with fashion and with technology at the time and everything. She was very intelligent, and she had an incredible inventory of books in her childhood home, so she seems to have been given a very good education in the home. She had no siblings, it was just her, so she seems to have been taught very well at home. Not much is known about her middling younger years. She was born in 1734, and around 1774, so, 20 years or so of age, she is around the time that we start to see anything written about her being professionally active as a fortune teller or medium. In 1780 is when she's confirmed officially as a professional fortune teller, and her clientele kind of started coming from everywhere. She made her business not far from the Johannes Church in Stockholm, but it was in an alley in a poor part of town. It's in quotes in her biography where her business was. There were a lot of blind and crippled women, so it's where a bunch of people who couldn't really do much about anything lived, and that's where she had her place of business in order for customers to come and go discreetly of any walk of life, because this is not the poor part of town where people might be revolutionary or active. It was all sort of downtrodden, blind,
right,
old,
poor but reputable,
yeah,
sort of district.
So anyone could come and go as they please. There's a lot of speculation about her background at the time because she worked so well in circles of high society in the court, and she was also very comfortable in the neighborhood out of which her business operated, and her clientele was, rich to poor all across the board, and she was equally comfortable everywhere. So there were a lot of rumors about who she was as a person. She did card readings, she did the reading of coffee grounds, tea leaves, that sort of thing. I think she did more coffee than tea because it's Swedish. She had 2 assistants. One was of African origin, and one was described as a Turkish woman from Morocco. So she went out of her way to find what you could in the Swedish court define as exotic women, although I hate that term for her people. At the time, it was very mood setting, not just how her office was decorated. There was a lot of drapes and scene setting in her office, but also the people that she brought in as her assistants, and also while they were her assistants, learned from her. She went out of her way to find things that were foreign and maybe mysterious to the people of the town. She immediately, very, very quickly, became very popular within the aristocracy. She had an incredible reputation for never being wrong, and her predictions became more and more accurate every year, according to rumor. The longer she did it, the more accurate she got. Depending on who you talk to, she had a wide net of informers from all over society, from the royal household down to private homes, because she was so tight with the working class that dealt with all of the, handmaidens and private dressers and all of that sort of thing. Because she came from the courts in that area, she basically knew all of the maids and all of the butlers and all of the whatever. Was she well connected and knew a lot of gossip? Was she a fortune teller, or was she both and just consistently well informed and used that to help make her predictions? She got so popular and so famously successful and accurate that she became part of an informer with the police department long before any police department in the world had any sort of help of that regard. Members of the royal...
She's the original police psychic?
Yeah, she's the original police psychic. She had members of the royal house who were asking her for political advice, and she actually was consulted by Gustav III during his reign, as well as Duke Charles and a bunch of other influential people in the Russo-Swedish War. So she became very politically influential as a fortune teller. She had a really long streak and was very successful and popular for quite some time, but for no really known reason, she died in more or less poverty. She became much less lucrative. I couldn't really find a good answer to the question of why. Did she fall out of favor? Were her predictions inaccurate? But she had a very long and very successful career as a fortune teller in the court of Gustav III, but didn't seem to sustain that success throughout her entire life. After she died, a whole bunch of professional fortune tellers tried to say that they were her students in the occult. No one has been able to prove that they were her students in the occult, other than the 2 people that were her assistants. And there's not even that much proof that she did more to train them, other than having them around all of the time.
Yeah, that she ever sat down and formally taught them anything.
Yeah. So, that's my pick, Ulrica Arfvidsson.
Very interesting, very interesting. So now we move on to our rubric where we try and decide which of these historical hotties is hotter. So on the subject of physical attractiveness, mine was a little bit hard to figure out. I could not find any pictures of Lee when he was young, or any even real descriptions of what he looked like. The only pictures of him at all I could find were court pictures from when he was much older, and they're very sort of general, respectable, older scholar looking, you know, hawkish, dignified sort of profile. And so I'm not quite sure what to say on physical attractiveness because I could not find a wealth of information about what he looked like.
That's very funny because the same goes for Ulrica.
Really?
She very little that I could find talked about her looks at all. It's all about her accuracy and her popularity and her savvy, and very little about whether she was attractive or unattractive. And usually I feel like if people are not attractive, when you're researching them in history, it's said somewhere.
Yeah, if they're notably, like, unattractive, if they're notably any extreme, that's sort of usually talked about.
A Google image search reveals a lot of old portraits, but most of them don't seem to be of her when you actually look at the title and who took it and all that, who painted it, all that sort of thing. None of them actually seem to be about her. The one picture that I found that is titled with her name is a Revolvi.com sort of thumbnail image of a portrait that's in black and white. And it's a very attractive lady. She looks very much of the time and also of Sweden. She looks really Swedish.
Real hardcore Swedish.
I have no idea what color her eyes were. Her hair looks blonde, and she's wearing a very fashionable dress, which I would assume if she was successful and also popular in the court. But it's very hard to actually find anything about what she looks like. The one portrait I did find is very charming. She didn't have a whole lot of chin going for her. It's one of those who sort of, her face stops at the lips, but she had, you know, a long neck, and she had a lot of décolletage in the portrait, and very sort of smirking eyes. And that portrait is the only one that I can find, and I can't substantiate if that's even her. That's just, the image is titled with her name. So
what do we want to do? Do we want to eliminate this category? Do we want to give them both like a 3 or something because we're not sure?
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe let's score a 3 for each. Let's go right down the middle of the road.
Okay, because I'm with you that if they were either really gorgeous or really hideous, we probably would have turned up something in their descriptions. Yeah.
Yeah, if mine was a hideous old hag that was very accurate, I feel like that would have gone down in history. Mm-hmm. I feel the same for you. If it was some grizzled, gnarled, hunchback kind of person, you would know that about him because so much else is known about him. All right, so let's move on to mental attractiveness.
Okay. One of the things that I really love about Lee Chunfeng is how much of a polymath he is. He wrote books on mathematics, and he wrote a treatise on Taoism, which was influenced by his father, who was a Taoist. He worked in astrology and meteorology and music. He wrote histories of the Sui and Jin dynasties. He also annotated the 9 chapters on mathematical art, which already existed, and I like that whenever he did an annotation, he wrote, "Your servant Chunfeng and his collaborators comment respectfully on," and then whatever his annotation
But you're
was.
totally wrong.
Yeah, you're totally wrong, but we respectfully point out that you're totally wrong. I love people who are curious and interested in so many things and sort of interconnect their knowledge to apply it in different fields. So I think pretty intellectually attractive. I also just really like the idea of, I'm going to write 60 prophecies, but I'm going to do surrealist drawings of them instead. Not really any harder to interpret than the sort of vague, written prophecies that we get so much of the time. But I like that he interpreted them through a different medium. So I would definitely give him a 4 for mental attractiveness.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say 4, maybe even 5, because that's... Very rarely do you see anyone who's that interested in math and science who's also like, here's 60 predictions for the future.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. So I think I'm going to vote a 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For mine, there's not too much. She was renowned as being very sharp and well educated. My favorite thing about her is that everyone went to her in disguise, not just to retain their anonymity, but to test her powers of divination.
Right. Can you tell who I really am?
And whether this was because she was super well connected and well informed and knew people in everybody's houses, or whether this was because she was good at fortune telling, she would play this game of like looking into their coffee grounds and immediately revealing their identities. And it happened over and over again with royalty, with political people, like all over the place, generals, the king. It's a story you continually see when you look at some of her predictions, is that not only did she predict X event, but she first looked into the coffee grounds and saw, you're not a pauper, you're the king. And apparently that was very impressive to people, and I think that game, whether it's fortune-telling and, being able to see through disguises, or whether that's her just being extraordinarily well-connected and filled in and all of the gossip and knowing who's who and knowing what everyone looks like and how everyone acts, and maybe even knowing, like, maybe someone came and warned her that the king was coming to see her. Maybe someone warned her that General Admiral af Troll was coming to see her.
You just wanted to say that name.
I did. So other than her being very, very intelligent by record, I think that alone, whether or not you believe in fortune tellers or prognosticators, she put a lot of work into eliminating error of margin. She did everything she could to be well connected and well informed and to know what was going on. And I'm sure that a lot of her predictions and a lot of her fortune telling and a lot of her coffee ground reading came from her knowing everything about everybody on purpose.
Yeah, just her savvy, that even if,
exactly,
whether she believed she had, like, second sight or anything like that, she wasn't going to leave any avenue of information unutilized. Exactly.
So I think that's pretty great. So I'm going to score her a 4.
Yeah, I think that kind of, from your description of her, not just get, like, a savvy, but a sort of sense of fun and, like, playing into the glamour of the whole thing that is attractive. So I would definitely say a 4.
All right. So, Lindsay, social impact.
I think Li Chunfeng's social impact was really significant. The reform calendar that he introduced is called the Lind calendar, and it improved the prediction of planet position and actually had an earlier version of a leap day, what was called an interclarial month, and instead of adding a leap day every couple of years, it would catch up a lunar year to a solar year by adding it every 3 years to kind of even them out. Obviously, incredibly trusted and influential in the Imperial Astronomy Bureau, because he was trusted to basically mess with the composition of the heavens and the fate. Plus, his Book of Prophecy has lasted and been used until it was suppressed in communist transition of China, and even then has come back in recent years in China, and people are using it to reference to try and figure out the last 5 predictions again. I think it's about as much influence as one could have in a lifetime. He affected for generations. I would say a 5.
Okay. I think that I agree. I think that he has a lot of social impact. Not having heard of him or anything that he's done before today, I don't know if it's a 5 or more of a 4.
Well, but if you'd grown up in China.
It's true. I probably would have had had heard from him. But I think that's always part of the, malleability of social impact is how much do I personally care about what's being socially impacted and have I heard of them before? So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to say a 4.
Okay.
So for mine, I mean, she's not quite in as large a sphere as all of China for that many years. She was incredibly influential in the Russian-Swedish War. She was incredibly influential in Swedish politics and in the court at the time. She has been a character in more than one opera.
Always a mark of distinction.
She's also mentioned in the novel The Queen's Tiara by Carl Jonas Love Almquist. And she's in, as far as historical documents go, she's in a crazy number of memoirs and diaries and things that people have written from their time in the court. And, all of these people who wrote any kind of missive about the time that they spent in court or about their memories or about anything like that. Pretty much anyone who came across her wrote about her, even if they were foreign travelers to the court or whatever. She's in an incredible number of historical documents that we have found and preserved. So she was consulted by King Gustav of Sweden in disguise. He came to her in the company of a count who was also posing as somebody else. And she gave them several predictions about the king's past and future, and also that of his escort, who she was able to accurately name the Count. And at that occasion, she warned King Gustav III about an assassination attempt, essentially. She said, "Beware of the man with the sword you will meet this evening, for he aspires to take your life." That was remembered later in 1972 when the king was assassinated at a mosque ball. He was shot, not stabbed, but she said, "The man with the sword you meet this evening." No one knows if he met Jacob Johan Anakstrom that evening, but he was assassinated later on, so that's one of the big things that, she predicted his assassination. She also was consulted by either police or the court, or both, about the conspiracy to depose the guardian government of King Gustav IV of Sweden by an alliance with Russia. So there was a lot of that sort of thing where, is there a conspiracy? Let's go consult Ulrica. So she had a great deal of social impact in her sphere, but her sphere is sort of notably less long and less broad than all of China for many, many years, possibly up till present day. So I'm going to rate her a 4.
I mean, I definitely think she sounds pretty influential in her way. Anybody who gets to consult on a war, it's a pretty high social impact rating. So yeah, I would say a 4 is probably a fair ranking.
Okay. So, je ne sais quoi.
I really like in my reading about Li Chunfeng how he's sort of, in a very quiet, dignified, reserved sort of way that would fit into the imperial court, still exerted his personality. The way in which he commented on annotations, and that he wrote a treatise on Taoism when it was kind of not popular to be a Taoist. Confucianism had come in with the whole uniting of China, and it wasn't illegal or anything, but it was not popular, and he still wrote a treatise on Taoism. And I do like how he expressed his prophecies through a visual medium instead of a written one. I think that that's a really interesting choice, and I don't know of anybody else who chose a medium like that to express their prophecies. So I would definitely, I like the sort of quiet way that he was resolutely himself. So I would give him 4 in Je ne sais quoi.
I would agree. I've pretty much given you all of the examples that I have. There's not a ton out there because, honestly, people are not as interested in Sweden as they are in China. Mainly because there's so many more people in China.
A lot more historians to write about stuff.
So most of the research that I did, we've already covered. But I do think that it's kind of been a running theme throughout that she was very smart and very savvy, and she used being smart and savvy to not necessarily manipulate those around her, but to consistently back up her case and to, again, not manipulate or nothing that I've read seems to construe any sort of malice. It all seems to be from a good, well-intentioned place. However, she definitely did assert her connections and her intellect and use that as leverage whenever she could.
And I would say definitely even just her social mobility in a time when it was hard to be socially mobile, that she could associate with people from anywhere in any kind of class structure, indicates that she had to have been charming and confident, because there's no other way you can pull that off. So.
Absolutely. So I vote a 5.
I mean, she seems to be pretty full of je ne sais quoi. And I like the way that she seemed to embrace, like we did, the glamour and the fun of it, as well as, you know, even talking about serious predictions and stuff, that she had a sense of theater and, you know, that kind of thing. So I would say she seems like a very je ne sais quoi person. I would agree with your 5.
All right. That being said, I have our totals, and we have a tie.
A tie. Ooh. Now, did either of our picks see that coming?
Oh, that's a stupid joke.
I know, I couldn't help myself.
So, that being said, I feel like once again we leave it up to you, the listener, to chime in. We are at Historically Hot on Twitter, and we would love to get your votes. Let us know who you think won. Who is the most convincing historical hottie in the realm of fortune-telling? That's all that we have today, so thanks for listening.
And join us next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Can't regret my